Martin had always been a man of few words, but of firm actions. In the village they said his word was worth more than any paper signed before a notary. He lived with Clara, his wife, and his son, Julian, on a farm surrounded by oak trees and cornfields that seemed to stretch to the horizon. Everything in his life revolved around work, family, and faith. He was a man of habits, and even his silences had an order. Every dawn, before the sun peeked out, he was already up. He lit the fire, washed his face with cold water from the well, and went out to the field. There, while the roosters crowed, his silhouette blended with the mist. Clara liked to watch him from the window. She said watching him work was like looking at an old tree resisting the winds of time. Julian, though young, was his reflection. He had the same firm gaze and the same way of walking, but in him burned a different restlessness. He dreamed of knowing the world beyond the valley. "Father, they say in the city there is light even at night," he would tell him. Martin smiled with patience. "The true light, son, is not in the streets, but in the soul." Everything flowed with the calm of identical days, until one afternoon an imperceptible change began. The air became heavy, the animals more restless, and the nights strangely cold. The wind brought a long whistle, like a lament. At first, Martin thought it was the weather, but Clara noticed something more: the silence. The crickets, the toads, even the neighborhood dogs had fallen silent. The first night they heard the song was like a knife in the air, a prolonged dry screech, so sharp that it made the windows shudder. Clara clung to her rosary. "My God, that sound is not of this world." Martin went out to the threshold and searched with his eyes among the trees. There, on the highest branch of the great walnut tree, a white shadow swayed gently. It was not a common bird. Its wings were oversized and its eyes two burning embers. For a few seconds they stared at each other. Time seemed to stop. The owl turned its head, emitted another screech, and vanished into the darkness. Martin returned inside, but the tremor in his hands betrayed him. "Don't worry, Clara," he said with a firm voice, though deep down something in his chest had cracked. The following nights were worse. The song returned always at the same hour, between midnight and the first rooster crow. Julian, who slept in the back room, began to have nightmares. He said he dreamed of a woman dressed in white watching him from the window. Clara, increasingly nervous, filled the house with candles and holy water. One midday, Martin went to the village for provisions and decided to visit Don Aurelio, the wise old man. He found him sitting under the shade of a mesquite, smoking his pipe with a thoughtful air. "Don Aurelio," said Martin, "I need to talk to you." "I'm listening, boy. What troubles you?" "There's a bird prowling my house. It won't let me sleep, and I feel something is not right." The old man frowned. "A white bird with burning eyes?" Martin nodded. Don Aurelio lowered his gaze and murmured almost to himself, "It's not the first time that creature visits these lands. Some call it the omen, others the shadow of regret." "What do you mean?" asked Martin, frowning. "It means," replied the old man, "that this owl does not fly for pleasure. Where it rests its wings, someone must pay a debt." Martin grew uncomfortable. "I have no debts with anyone." "Sometimes debts are not paid with money," retorted Aurelio in a measured voice, "but with broken promises or words said to the wind." Martin left without saying more, though the echo of those words followed him all the way back. That night, the song returned, closer. It seemed to come from the roof. The sound pierced the walls and the blood. Clara cried silently, and Julian, pale, covered his ears. Martin went out with the machete, determined to end the torment. He searched with the flashlight among the trees, but all he saw were shadows, moving to the rhythm of the wind. Suddenly, a white flash crossed the air and the screech returned, so loud that he felt a stabbing pain in his chest. The flashlight flickered and went out. In the darkness, a woman's voice whispered in his ear, "Why do you call me if you're not ready to see me?" Martin spun around with his heart racing, but there was no one, only the owl staring at him from the ground, a few steps away. Its body was larger than he remembered, and its breathing sounded human, deep, almost panting. He stepped back and the bird took flight, disappearing among the trees. At dawn, they found him sitting by the well with a lost gaze. Clara touched his shoulder. "What did you see, Martin?" "Nothing that can be explained with words." The days became strange. The well water dawned cloudy, the cows mooed for no reason, and one of the mares died without a visible wound. Fear settled in the house like another guest. Julian, increasingly pale, barely ate. He said he heard footsteps on the roof at night. Clara insisted on bringing Father Benitez to bless the house. When the priest arrived, the air inside the dwelling became cold like a basement. As he recited the prayers, the candles went out one by one. Martine watched in silence, feeling something invisible surrounding them. "This house is marked," said the father in a grave voice. "Someone or something claims what was taken from it." Martine wanted to protest, but deep down he knew he had done something. He remembered a day, years ago, when he had found an injured owl and, in his ignorance, had driven it away with stones for considering it a bad omen. Since then, every time he saw one, he muttered insults to scare it away. Now, he thought, perhaps that contempt had been heard. That night there was no song. The silence was worse. Clara slept fitfully, and Julian delirious with fever. Martine sat by his bed praying in a trembling voice, "If it's for me, take me, but leave my family in peace." Suddenly, a sharp knock on the door echoed in the house. 3 knocks, paused, as if someone were knocking with their knuckles. Martine got up and opened it. Outside there was no one, only the wind moving the weeds. But on the ground, right in front of the threshold, he found a white feather, larger than his hand, stained with red. Clara woke, startled upon hearing him shout her name. She ran to him and saw the feather in his hand. "Don't touch it, Martine." But it was too late. The blood from the feather had left a stain on his palm. From that moment, Julian's fever worsened. No medicine calmed him. His breathing became labored, and his eyes lost their shine. Desperate, Martine returned to seek Don Aurelio. The old man, upon seeing him enter, knew immediately what was happening. "I warned you," he said. "That creature seeks balance. If you harmed one of its kind, it will come for what it considers just." "What can I do?" begged Martine. "I won't let it take my son. You can't fight it like an animal. The only way is to face it on its own ground. When it returns, don't flee. Look it in the eyes and pray until it shows itself as it is. But beware, Martine, when a witch shows her true face, the soul of the one who sees it never returns the same." Martine nodded without speaking. That night, he waited in the yard, the machete at his side and the rosary between his fingers. The full moon bathed the field with a milky light. The song returned, heart-rending, and a gust of wind extinguished all the lamps. At the top of the walnut tree, the white silhouette watched him. Martine stepped forward and began to pray. "Our Father who art in heaven," the air vibrated, the owl flapped its wings violently. "Hallowed be thy name." The screech became a human lament, as if a woman were crying inside the bird's throat. Suddenly, the animal's body contorted. The feathers fell like rain. Before his eyes, the figure changed. An old woman, hunched with tangled hair and eyes of fire, emerged from the glow. The figure standing before Martine was neither human nor animal, but a mixture of both. Her skin, grayish and wrinkled, seemed made of ash. Instead of eyes, she had 2 burning hollows that exhaled a red glow. Her bony hands extended toward him, as if seeking to touch him. "Do you think you can undo what you did with your prayers?" she whispered in a voice that seemed to come from everywhere. Martine stepped back, clutching the rosary. "I do not fear you. You have no power over my faith." The woman let out a dry, cracked laugh. "Your faith, you lost it years ago. When you rejected what you did not understand, when you threw stones at the sky believing you were warding off evil, you became its echo." The wind swirled around her. Clara, from inside, prayed aloud while Julian moaned with fever. Martine clenched his teeth and continued reciting, "Thy kingdom come." The witch let out a screech that shattered one of the windows. "Do not invoke what you do not remember," she said, advancing one more step. Her shadow lengthened across the ground like a living stain. Martine felt his heart pounding in his chest, but he continued, "Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven." The witch growled. Her face deformed, and for an instant she had a beak and feathers again. "You called me, Martine," she whispered. "I cried in your field the night my body was wounded. You denied me mercy. Now I come to take what is mine." "Enough!" shouted Martine. "I will not allow you to touch my family." Then the creature raised a hand, and the rosary he held became burning hot. Martine let it go in pain. On the ground, the beads moved on their own, forming a circle that began to burn with blue fire. "I offered you signs, warnings, dreams, but you chose fear." Her voice became softer, almost sad. "It is always fear that turns us into monsters." The wind stopped abruptly. The fire went out, and the witch vanished in a whirlwind of leaves. Martine fell to his knees, gasping. Clara ran to him. "What happened?" she asked, trembling. "I don't know," he replied with empty eyes, "but it has not gone. It only changed form." The following days were of thick silence. Julian worsened. Sometimes he murmured senseless phrases. He spoke to someone invisible, said a woman visited him in dreams and promised him rest. Clara cried without consolation. Martin, exhausted, barely spoke. One afternoon Don Aurelio appeared at the door. He carried in his hands a small flask with water and a wooden cross. "There is not much time," he said. "I have seen its shadow prowling the river. Tonight it will come for the boy." Martin looked at him, desperate. "How can I stop it? You cannot stop what seeks balance, but you can offer it something that evens the scale." "What do you mean?" "Every debt has a payment. And when life touches darkness, the price is usually blood or forgiveness." Martin understood. That night he did not sleep. He sat beside Julian and took his hand. "Son," he whispered, "I will not let it take you. If someone must pay, it will be me." At midnight the wind blew again. The candles went out. A white shadow crossed the roof, and a sharp blow shook the walls. Clara woke and shouted Martin's name, but he was already outside. In the center of the yard the witch stood again, larger, more twisted. "Why do you insist?" she said to him in a hollow voice. "You cannot defeat what you yourself invoked." Martin advanced with Aurelio's cross in his hand. "If you seek justice, take it from me, not from my son." The creature tilted its head. "Would you offer yourself in his place?" "Yes, but leave them in peace." Silence stretched. The witch looked at him with those eyes of fire that seemed to read the soul. "So your sacrifice will be accepted," she said finally, "but you will know what it is to carry eternal guilt." She extended her hand, and a glow enveloped him. Martin felt an intense cold, then unbearable heat, as if his blood were burning. In his mind echoed the screech of 1,000 owls. When he opened his eyes, the witch was gone, and in the sky, a white flock circled over the farm. Upon returning inside, Clara found Julian awake, without fever, but Martin staggered, pale as a corpse. "What did you do?" she asked, crying. "What I had to," he replied in a hoarse voice. For weeks it seemed everything had returned to normal. The animals healed, the crops flourished, and Julian regained his smile. But Martin was no longer the same. He would get up in the early hours, go out to the yard and look at the sky as if searching for something. Sometimes he murmured prayers that no one understood. One night, Clara woke and did not find him. She went out to look for him and saw him standing by the well, looking at his reflection in the water. "Martin," she said, approaching, "come inside, it's cold." He did not respond. When she got closer, she saw in the reflection not her husband, but a white figure with wings spread. She let out a choked scream. Martin turned, and for an instant his eyes glowed like embers. "I can no longer stay," he said softly. "I gave my word, and now I am part of the balance." "Don't talk like that, please," she begged, hugging him. Martin gently pushed her away. "Take care of Julian. Tell him that fear only has power when we feed it." That was the last time she saw him. At dawn, the well was covered with white feathers, and in the air floated a distant, sad song. Julian grew up with the memory of his father as an example of bravery and sacrifice. Clara aged praying every night in front of the cross that Aurelio had left on the table. But she never spoke of the owl again. Years passed, and the story became legend. The village children grew up hearing that on full moon nights, a white figure flew over the fields. Some said it was a protective spirit, others that it was the witch seeking redemption. One dawn, many years later, Julian, now a man, returned to the old land. He wanted to close the cycle, to look once more at the earth where he had grown up. The cornfield swayed with the wind, and the well was still there, intact. He knelt and prayed. "Father, if you are here, I want you to know that I hold no grudge against you." The echo returned his voice. Then he heard a slight flapping of wings behind him. He turned slowly, and on the fence, a white owl stared at him fixedly. "Is it you?" he asked in a whisper. The bird tilted its head and emitted a soft song, different, almost sweet. Julian felt a peace he had never felt. In its eyes he thought he saw the reflection of his father, smiling. The wind blew strongly, raising dust and dry leaves. When he opened his eyes, the owl was gone. In its place on the fence rested an old wooden cross, the same one Don Aurelio had given Martin. Julian took it in his hands and understood that the cycle had ended. He looked at the sky, where a last white feather descended slowly, shining with the light of dawn. Since then, they say in the village that when an owl sings in the early morning, it does not always announce misfortune. Sometimes it is the soul of one who seeks balance between guilt and forgiveness. Clara died years later, with a serene smile. On her deathbed, they said she murmured names and prayers, as if someone were waiting for her on the other side. Julian, turned into an old man, kept the story alive, telling it to the children by the fire. "My father did not fear the darkness," he would say. He only wanted to understand it. The children listened with wide eyes, and when the wind blew strong among the trees, some hugged each other, swearing they had heard the flapping of an invisible bird. Thus was born the new version of the legend. Some still claim to have seen a white silhouette flying over the field on quiet nights. Others assure that if one prays with sincere faith upon hearing its song, the owl leaves a feather at the door as a sign of protection. But there are also those who assure that if you insult it, if you provoke it with words of contempt, the air becomes heavy and the animals fall silent. And then, among the shadows, one can hear a feminine voice saying, "Balance always collects." From that day, no inhabitant of the village dares to curse the nocturnal birds, because they know that among them, somewhere in the sky, flies the soul of Martine, neither completely man nor entirely spirit, but guardian of what fear failed to understand. And so, the story repeats, from generation to generation, not as a warning, but as a reminder that not everything that frightens is an enemy, and not all darkness lacks light, because even the owl, feared for centuries, carries within its wings a fragment of redemption. And when its song cuts the silence of the early morning, the whole village stops, crosses its fingers, and prays in a low voice, "Fly in peace, old soul. May balance accompany you." Then the wind blows softly, the dogs calm down, and dawn seems to arrive earlier. Even today, when the sky covers with clouds and the night falls without a moon, some old people assure they see a white shadow crossing the paths. They say that if you keep silent, you can hear a slight murmur, an old prayer carried by the wind. No one knows if it is a lament or a blessing, but everyone upon hearing it lowers their head and prays, because in that whisper, they say, travels the spirit of Martine, the man who spoke with the darkness and discovered that even shadows can have a soul.